Hello and welcome back. In this video, we will look at how to do a vacuum test on a BlackTip DPV. For this demonstration, we are using a BlackTip Travel, but the procedure is the same if you have a BlackTip Tech. A vacuum test checks the integrity of the various seals and O-rings in your BlackTip DPV, which protect it from leaking or flooding during a dive. Which seals are we checking? There is a propeller shaft seal over here. It's made of rubber, and that protects the motor from getting flooded. Over here, we have the motor housing O-rings. There's one O-ring here and there's another O-ring here. And then finally, we have the tail unit O-rings, which you are already familiar with. So the vacuum test is checking these two O-rings, and the propeller shaft seal. Please note that the propeller shaft seal and these two O-rings are not easy to access. You essentially have to disassemble the tail unit, remove the motor housing, and that is something that is best done by a authorized service center, because if you make a mistake putting stuff back, your DPV could easily flood on your next dive. So how often should you do a vacuum test? Well, if you're using your BlackTip DPV regularly, then it might be a good idea to do a check every couple of months. Because if a seal is starting to fail, catching it early prevents extensive flooding or major damage. If you haven't used your BlackTip in a while and it's been in storage, then you should definitely do a vacuum test before you go for a dive, because prolonged storage may have deformed or damaged the rubber or the O-rings, especially in the summer temperatures in the UAE. So if it's been sitting for a while, you should definitely do a vacuum test. To perform the vacuum test, we need the vacuum bulkhead. XR Scuba has these. You can find a link in the description. It's very similar to the nose assembly. It's got the same two O-rings, and that's exactly how it works. Instead of the nose, you put the vacuum bulkhead on the tube, right? And then you use this, which is a manual vacuum pump, to create a vacuum inside the tube, and also checking the housing, because it's all one unit at that point. And you create a vacuum, and this little pressure gauge here shows you what the vacuum is. And then you hold it for a certain amount of time, usually 15 minutes. And if it hasn't changed, then you know that the seals, the O-rings, everything is working fine. Now, there are two things to remember when you are using the vacuum bulkhead. First of all, don't create an excessive pressure, because there isn't that much of a vacuum inside the DPV when you're diving. So about 15 inches of mercury, which is what this pressure gauge is calibrated in, 15 inches of mercury is more than enough. You hold 15 inches of mercury for 15 minutes, and that's an adequate test. The other thing is that when you release the pressure, and we'll show this later, do it slowly, because if you do it too fast, like emptying all the vacuum in an instant, it's possible you may damage a component, because again, it's not designed for rapid changes in pressure like that. So number one, aim for about 15 inches of mercury. Don't go any higher than that. You might damage the system. And when you're releasing the pressure, releasing the vacuum, after the test, do it slowly. We'll show you how, so that you don't risk damaging any of the components. Before testing, we have to make sure that the sealing surfaces on the tube where the O-rings engage are clean of any debris and contamination and very lightly lubricated with silicone grease. Same for the other side, visual inspection, cleaning and light lubrication. On the vacuum bulkhead, same thing, check the O-rings, if necessary remove them, clean the grooves, and then reinstall with a light coating of silicone grease. And finally on the tail unit, same thing, remove the O-rings if necessary, clean them, clean the grooves, lubricate them with a high quality silicone grease. If you need some, there's a link in the description. It's important that we conduct the vacuum test in a room with constant temperature, because changes in ambient temperature will affect the accuracy of the test. So make sure you're in a room where there's no great temperature changes, and also avoid moving the DPV while the test is happening. You want to leave it in one place so there's no chance of any error. Assemble the DPV, but instead of the nose, install the vacuum bulkhead. Make sure that the bulkhead is correctly seated and both O-rings are engaged. Next, take the vacuum pump and place it on the valve. Maintain a slight downward pressure and start creating a vacuum. Use the pump until the gauge shows around 15 inches of mercury. Start a timer for 15 minutes. During this time, don't move the unit and try to maintain a constant ambient temperature. So we have about 6 minutes left. That's about the halfway point. And as you can see, the needle hasn't moved at all. It's still solidly at 15 inches of mercury. Now you can do the vacuum test at 10 inches of mercury or even 5, but not less than 5 inches of mercury. And you can do it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, not more than 15 minutes because it can damage some of the components, but not less than 5 inches of mercury and not less than 5 minutes. Let's say you're in a hurry. For us, as an annual check or a biannual check, it's 15 inches of mercury for 15 minutes. And it doesn't move at all, which means the propeller shaft seal, the motor housing O-rings, and the tail unit O-rings are all working perfectly well. So we'll just let this finish and then we'll slowly release the pressure. Timer's almost finished and the pressure is still 15 inches of mercury. So we remove the timer, confirm the pressure hasn't changed, which means all the seals and O-rings are in good condition. Now we slowly release the vacuum by just pushing or pulling on this valve stem. You can see the needle start to move, and it's important to do this slowly because we don't want to suddenly shock the system and all the seals and everything with a rapid release, a rapid change in internal pressure. It could damage some components. So we'll just go nice and slow. It's 10 inches, 5 inches, and then confirm it's actually 0. Because if there is any vacuum left inside, it will be quite difficult to remove this because you'll be pulling against a vacuum. So just make sure there's nothing left, and then you can remove the vacuum bulkhead. So what do we do if the vacuum test fails? So if there's a leak in any of the O-rings or the shaft seal, then we will notice a significant change in the pressure on the vacuum bulkhead after 15 minutes. Now, there are several places where the leak can come from. There is the propeller shaft seal, the motor housing O-rings, the tail unit O-rings, the vacuum bulkhead O-rings, the vacuum bulkhead valve, and of course the sealing surfaces on the tube. So if this happens and you notice that the unit is not holding a vacuum, then the first thing we do is manually turn the propeller to confirm a smooth and silent rotation. Any unusual friction or grinding sound during manual rotation may indicate a problem with the shaft seal. Reinspect the sealing surfaces, making sure they are clean, free of contamination, and lightly lubricated. Then do the same for the O-rings on the tail unit. Inspect them carefully to make sure there are no debris which might be causing the leak. Check the vacuum bulkhead O-rings, making sure that they are clean, free of contamination, and lightly lubricated. And check the valve. It's a rubber top that should just come off like that. And just make sure this surface is clean and this surface is clean. The rest is just a plastic flange. This is the part which creates the seal. So it's possible there may be a leak here, so just make sure this is clean, and if it's all good, just press it back into place. Once you've confirmed that all the sealing surfaces are in good condition and lightly lubricated, reassemble the unit, reinstall the vacuum bulkhead, and repeat the vacuum test. If it fails again, do not dive the unit. Contact XR Scuba for support, and we'll do our best to help you out. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and we will respond over there.